let's go back over to our Mint Mobile hotline today, shall we, with a really interesting comparison of the MCU and a Michael Scott-less The Office. Check it out.
Hey, this is Carl. How's it going, John and crew? So ever since Endgame ended, it sort of reminds me of once Michael Scott left The Office. It was still good, but it just felt like it was missing something. Even the couple movies after Endgame had some old faces like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Patrick Stewart. Do you think for Marvel to be successful, they need to keep bringing back old characters? And how much would you pay someone like Robert Downey Jr. to come back? All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, Carl, thanks a lot for calling that in, man. Yeah, listen, I remember back a few years ago when after Endgame had come out, I had done a Thoughts on Walks video where I talked about the particular challenges that Marvel was going to face now post Endgame. And one of those challenges I said, it's like, look, do not underestimate the size of this challenge. The MCU has just lost its two most important characters and its two most important actors in Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. Not because they're the biggest stars or whatever, but because Captain America and Iron Man were the heartbeat of the MCU. They were the identity of the MCU. They were the faces of the MCU. And even in movies that didn't have either of them, you could feel the influence that this is a world in which Tony Stark and Steve Rogers are, right? It's something that permeated everything about Marvel and the MCU at the time. And when they lost those two characters, I didn't say it was an insurmountable challenge. I said this is going to be one of the big challenges facing the MCU moving forward, is that they've got to get over this. And let me jump around the questions you asked, because you asked, is the answer that you need to keep bringing back old actors? No, I don't think the answer is that. I mean, that can help if you want to. Obviously, everybody got really excited when Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield popped up in Spider-Man No Way Home. Sure, that's always a good kick for nostalgia and feel good and make you feel like you're at home a little bit. It doesn't hurt. But, in the post-Endgame world, one of the things I really thought that Marvel needed to do that they have not done, and quite frankly, haven't even really tried to do, is with Steve and Tony gone, re-establish what the identity of the MCU is. Because right from Iron Man 1, they established the identity of the MCU and then expanded out a little bit, but it always came back to that core identity. And we understood exactly who the Avengers were. And we knew exactly who the leaders of the MCU are. And even everything culminating in Civil War, because the two main faces, Tony and Steve and all that kind of stuff. Since Phase 4, Marvel hasn't even really honestly attempted to establish what is the MCU now? What is the identity? We certainly don't have anybody who's the face of the MCU anymore. And I think that has become a bigger deal than most people want to admit it is. Because before, again, you always have these two primary people that were always the identity and the face of it, and we really don't have it. And I think that plays a little bit, Rob, into something that you've talked about a lot, which is as we've moved from Phase 4 into Phase 5, a lot of the fans don't even see any connective tissue. Like, we really don't even see what is the story of the MCU. In Phases 1, 2, and 3, yes, we had individual stories going on, but it always felt like it was a part of one bigger world that had its faces and its main identity. And Marvel hasn't really done that. Even though I've loved WandaVision, I've loved Ms. Marvel, I love Shang-Chi, I've liked a number of the other things that they've done as well, I couldn't tell you what is the MCU right now. Like, what is the idea? I couldn't tell you who the leaders of it are. I couldn't tell you who the main faces of it are. I can't tell you which characters kind of give the identity to the MCU that we had up until Endgame. And that's one of the things that made the MCU so special. And maybe one or two freckles of the pixie dust that gave the MCU its magic back then, but they definitely not. And I love your analogy of I've never thought of it in these terms, but the way you put it, man, it kind of feels like The Office after Michael Scott left. There's still very, very good pieces there. And I'll tell you what, some of the best episodes of The Office happened after Michael Scott. Sure. So there's some great highlights. There's great core there. You have some great characters there. You can still tell some really good stories. But after Michael left, They tried to make Andy the face of the show, and that was a mistake. They should have immediately made Jim and Dwight the main focus of that show when he left, but they didn't. So the rest of The Office kind of felt a little directionless, like a little bit without its identity a bit and everything too. And I love your analogy of that. That's exactly how I put it. Now, as far as your final question about how much would I pay Robert Downey Jr. to come back? My knee-jerk reaction would be to say whatever he wanted, right? Because look, Robert Downey and Chris Evans will both be back at some point, whatever. But you can't pay him whatever he wants. Because to draw an NFL analogy, when you pay one quarterback a ridiculous amount of money, guess what? Now what everybody else wants goes up too. So you can say, well, give Robert Downey Jr. $1 billion. Okay, that's great, but guess what's going to happen? Your next round of contract negotiations with Mahershala Ali, or your next round of negotiations with Florence Pugh or Sebastian Stan or Letitia Wright or Paul Rudd or any of them, guess what? What they wanted ain't what they want anymore. Now what they want is 3 times higher because you gave Robert that. And that's now going to be the shell. So you got to be financially responsible. You can't just give him whatever he wants. But the answer isn't necessarily just go and get Steve and Tony back. You've got to start investing, like in boxing, Ray. I hear him often talk when boxers go to the body. Those aren't the sexy shots. But the boxing commentators will often say they're investing in the body. You keep hitting the body, eventually that other boxer is going to run out of gas and they're going to crumble. And I don't see Marvel investing in creating the new identity of the MCU. And I think while just getting Robert Downey Jr. back or getting old actors back is not the fix-all, but they got to do something to start reestablishing this identity again. We want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, Mint Mobile. If saving more and spending less is one of your top goals for 2023, why are you still paying insane amounts of money every month for your phone bill? Switching to Mint Mobile is the easiest way to save this year. As the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, Mint Mobile lets you order from home and save a ton with phone plans starting at just $15 a month. You guys know I made the switch over to Mint Mobile a while ago. The process couldn't have been easier, and I can't believe that I am spending less than a third of what I was spending on one of the other major carriers before. By going online only and eliminating the traditional costs of retail, Mint Mobile passes the significant savings on to you. All plans come with unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and switch easily in minutes with eSIM. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door free, go to mintmobile.com/Campea. That's mintmobile.com/Campea. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/Campea. Anyway, Chris, you heard the call, stuff like that. What do you think about the comparison of the MCU right now is like The Office without Michael Scott, and what do you think they need to do moving forward here with that?
I think it's a great comparison because to your point, yeah, there's a couple shining episodes after he left, but for the most part, you really feel that absence. And it's because we had this wonderful, it's one of my favorite archetypes. It's what my husband Logan plays a lot in things, the affable nitwit. You have the very, very affable but clueless guy who, even though he's not particularly good at his job, there are moments where he shines. He absolutely loves people, but just has very large shortcomings, but you love him in spite of them, right? And then when he was gone, we had to have, well, then who takes up that mantle? And should that be Andy? Probably not. He started off as a dude who needed to go to anger management, and every character needs to grow and everything, but that's The Office. When it comes to the MCU, we had these characters who, you know, become heroes, and we had a decade to get used to all of them, right? And so right now it is trying to fill these very, very large shoes, but also we now expect a puzzle that's come together already. We had Endgame and everything built to that. So now with this last phase, it's felt very spaghetti at the wall. We're just throwing things out there and hoping something sticks. And that's not a really great method when it comes to a product that is already out in the world. That's really, really great for figuring out a prototype. But when you're actually sending it out to the masses, you don't want to just be like, hopefully. So I think what we're dealing with right now is, one, we are trying to get used to having new things, new people in this universe. but also we're not really sure what direction we ultimately want to go in. Maybe Kevin Feige and crew have a really clear direction that they want to go in this next phase. Maybe they really, really know what's there. I'm not in the room. I can't say anything of that. But what we've seen so far seems very, very rudderless.
Rob, when you look back in the earlier days of the MCU, you started with Nick Fury going to Robert Downey Jr. and saying, we're doing this thing called the Avengers Initiative. Then you see Nick Fury going to a revived Captain America, Steve Rogers, and say, the world needs you. And everything from that was them right away laying the groundwork, and they built around that, and that was the core identity. I kind of felt coming out of Endgame, they needed to, whether it's Nick Fury or a resurrected, Agent Coulson or whatever, sitting down with, I don't know, a Captain Marvel or T'Challa and saying, listen, the world is always going to need protecting. And whatever, and whatever, and whoever your central pieces are, and start to invest in it. I feel like they haven't done that. Do you, and where do they go from here?
Well, it's funny. Yesterday, dealing with my pregnant dog, I actually was watching Endgame because I'd never seen the IMAX enhanced version on Disney Plus. I was sitting in the room just with her on my lap, petting her, and I started watching Endgame. And you know how it opens with Hawkeye's family being snapped?
Yeah.
It's out on a real location. On a real farm somewhere where they ever shoot. Very bucolic, very great setting. A lot of wide shots establishing the environment that they're in. And as that movie goes along, even when they go kill Thanos on the Garden Planet, there's a realism to it. And every scene has gravitas. You have Steve Rogers sit down and have that great conversation with Natasha about whether or not, what are we doing? And she says, I have to do this. It's all that matters. There's no special effects. There's no volume stage. The thing that I think that is missing from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it kind of speaks to losing Michael Scott. I don't know that analogy as well because I haven't seen The Office,
yeah.
but I understand what it means to lose a character. The thing about it is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for all of its great fantasticalness, it had a grounding in reality through these characters that we got to know and love. And as much as crazy stuff was happening to them, they still felt like they were in environments that were real, places like even in when they're going through time in Endgame, when they go somewhere, they're back in a New York office building. They have to get this, they have to get the scepter. They've got to, get the Infinity Stones, and where they go places, even when Hulk is talking to the Ancient One, it's a roof of a building in New York. And while, it might be on a soundstage, it's still a naturalistic environment. And you believe it. I think the problem with what's happened to Marvel is we don't believe it anymore. It's gone too far into fantasy realm, and the characters themselves are too fantastical. Moon Knight, I don't believe Moon Knight. I don't believe that was a real human being. I believe that I'm watching a translation of a character that they didn't make me believe enough, because we're going to make him schizophrenic from the beginning. We're going to give him dissociative identity disorder, and then we're going to give you ancient Egyptian gods fighting on the pyramids of Giza. It didn't make me believe in Moon Knight. And I think what's missing is Michael Scott in The Office. You believe that guy. He might be not a guy you want to hang out with.
What would you call him? An affable
nitwit.
An affable
which
nitwit.
happens to be my Tinder profile name.
And you can believe in them. I think what's happened is moviegoers do not believe in the MCU the way they used to. I'm talking about overall, like buying into the reality of the MCU. And the first 3 phases, the whole Infinity Saga, you buy it because the characters are grounded in a reality that they set up and make us believe in. I think that's gone away.
Well, guys, the question is for you. What do you think about this whole idea about the identity of the MCU? Has they been able to kind of replicate or replace their DNA even after losing Steve and Tony? Or what else do you think that could be? Whatever your guys' thoughts are, jump down to the comments section below and leave your thoughts there.